It's dead, you guys. It's totally dead. It's more dead than Hunter Biden's chances of being an honorable son. More dead than Hillary Clinton's hopes and dreams from when she was a child. It's more dead than a gorilla with a 4-year-old who's just climbed into its enclosure. R.I.P. Harambe. For real though. The GOP is totally dead. They're dead. They're dead in the water. It's gone. They're going to go the way of the dodo. And here's the thing. Some people will say, well, it's happening right now, the death of the GOP. But I think it happened a long, long time ago. It started at least as far back as 2016. Maybe even before that. But Trump was certainly the death knell of this party. They're dead. They're not coming back. Now, look, I don't have a horse in this. I'm not a registered Republican. I'm not a registered Democrat either. Here in the United States, I would be what is identified as an independent. And the reason for that is because you can't really do political theory. You can't really be a political philosopher and have these kinds of, party-defined ideological commitments. Now, of course, everyone is going to be a little bit more right on things and maybe a little bit more left on some other things. And me personally, I believe that everybody is somewhere in the middle. I don't think that there's anyone who's absolutely aligned with the right on anything or aligned with the left on anything. But the way that these parties are constructed, they're just sort of an amalgam of positions on things that don't even necessarily make sense in a left-right paradigm. It's not exactly clear to me why someone who's in favor of lowering taxes is also necessarily, pro-life, for example. And this is obviously a tried point. People point this out a lot. I'm not a libertarian either, in case you were wondering. But I wanted to make this video today to talk about the death of the GOP and what it might mean going forward. So obviously, Trump was the ultimate outsider on the inside. He's someone who came in without any history in politics or government and basically single-handedly took over the Republican Party. It became a MAGA Trumpistan party almost overnight. He did it in one election cycle, won the primary, and then became the president. Wow. And he was running on a platform that was really against a lot of what the Republican Party had stood for a long time. Really this populist party where he's co-opting a lot of the working class that was left behind by the Democrats who used to have the whole working class to themselves. And especially after they burned Bernie, there really wasn't a lot of places for, the working class of the United States to go besides into the Trump populist movement. They weren't going to get represented by the Democrats, who in my opinion are now the party of the rich. And they certainly weren't finding a lot of shelter with the traditional old GOP. The old GOP, which is sort of, in the service of, international big banks and oil companies and so forth. And so the MAGA takeover happened under Trump, and they spent 4 years sort of, laying out their plans and policies and implementing as close to as they could, I believe, a Trumpist vision for what the new GOP would look like. And of course, leading into this last election, there was a lot of talk, too, about, the future of the Republican Party, how it's going to be Trump's party, and people like Mitch McConnell and so forth are really just the old sort of plutocratic party, and there was going to be something new. But I think even with Trump out of office, the GOP is just done for. They're done for because now they've shown that they don't actually really care about majority of their voters. And what's going to happen now is they're going to continue to lose power, but there's going to be a vacuum because all of those people that voted for Trump, they're not just going to suddenly switch over to the Democrats. Now they may align a little bit. I think especially the union class, the working class of the Democrats may find a little bit of places to go inside of some of the more social democrat type regions of the Democratic Party. If they can get over their identity politics, which I think is poison for the Democrats, I think that they could actually sweep up a lot of the disaffected Trump voters who now hate the GOP. But in general, I think it's over. For a long time, for many decades, there wasn't a whole lot of real differentiation between the two parties. Basically, you had the Democrats, you had the Republicans, and they would sort of hand power back and forth, but it was largely the same neoliberal, plutocratic bullshit all the time. And I think you could really think of the GOP prior to this as something like controlled opposition. Now, of course, when I talk to my friends on the left, they say, no, you're not, the GOP, I have to not say you, because I'm actually not a GOP voter. I don't vote, I don't do whatever it's called. I don't vote straight ticket. I've never in one election even voted for all candidates of one party or the other. And so I'm committedly non-ideological. And of course, I want to keep this channel that way so that we can keep our minds open, so that we can keep our philosophical inquiry going, and so that we're not blindsided by slotting ourselves into this sort of narrow role here of ideology. Okay, so as I was saying, we need to get out of this two-party system. Eric Weinstein has this term that he uses to talk about the sort of fake show that goes on in politics. It's called kayfabe, and he adopted this from professional wrestling. In professional wrestling, you've got layers of deception that take place where the actors are putting on a show, and obviously the show is fake, but they can get so involved in the story that they actually forget that the story that they're in is not real life. And so this can get mixed up a little bit. But the idea in kayfabe is basically that, the fix is in. The fix is in as in both sides are pretending to be in opposition to each other, but they're both playing the same game. And they're aware, at least somewhat, that the sides aren't really real, that they're constructed. And the issue with kayfabe is, of course, you can get too deep into the role, kind of like a method actor, almost. And you can start to mess with your mind and actually think that the role that you're playing, as the Undertaker or whatever, is real. And there have been, hilarious stories of, there being professional wrestlers where there was a plot line where, one of them is cheating on the other one, sleeping with this other guy's wife and so forth. And then after a few months of keeping this up, they actually do it. And of course, you could say, well, maybe that would have happened anyway. But I think the point of this is that you can actually be in this kind of scenario so long where it's sort of a not really fake it till you make it, but fake it till you become it type situation. But anyway, so back to the two-party system. So the two parties, whether you're left or the right, you basically think that the other side is more or less controlled opposition, which means that they're, sort of tacitly opposing what the other side is doing, but ultimately, all the creatures that live in D.C. and that work in D.C., and especially these career politicians, are more or less on the same side. They're doing the same things, they're talking to the same people, and at least until the Trump era, they mostly, got along. Even, many people were friends across the aisle. But that era is a bygone era, I think. I think the Democratic Party is probably also going to have a crisis soon. I don't think that it's going to stay totally together under Joe Biden. Obviously, he's going to make some concessions to his more radical wing for a little while. And they're going to embrace identity politics with corporatism. You're going to have that merger with woke capital. That'll continue on apace. But ultimately, there's going to be a divide. There's going to be a divide because I think the Democrats, especially people like AOC and the Squad, are going to start to, under the Biden administration over the next 4 years, begin to realize that they actually do have to worry about class, and that these sort of surface level symbolic identity issues aren't going to carry the party into the future. So what does the end of the GOP mean, though? Because I think the end of the GOP is going to happen a lot faster. Now that Trump is out of the spotlight, he may be attempting to start a new party. There's some rumors about that. There's some rumors about him starting a media company, about him starting a new party, something called the Patriot Party, which is a terrible name. That's terrible branding. Don't do it. But if he does do that, what's going to happen is the entire mass of people that voted for Trump, the MAGA movement, the MAGA people, are all going to go, and they're going to be with him. You know, Fox News ratings are already plummeting because they weren't really on his side in this whole, you know, election shabacle. And so what's going to happen is the floor is going to fall out from under the GOP. And they're going to, you know, more desperately try to appeal to their donors because they want to keep the money coming in, and they're going to be losing a lot of their grassroots base. But I don't think it's going to work. And I wouldn't be surprised if by the end of the Biden administration, we have a real, genuine third party. Now, I know everyone's saying, look, Alex, the two-party system, it's game theoretically impossible. The way that it's set up, you can't have a third party. It's just not going to work. It's not going to work. They're never going to get more than, you know, maybe 10% of the vote. And, you know, the dynamics of it are such that it's always just going to be whatever comes up is just going to get absorbed into one of the other two. But the thing is, we've actually had third parties before. We've had parties come out and disappear from the American system. Even if the last one that happened a really long time ago. And so there is a real chance that one of these parties dies. And I think it'll be the GOP first. I think they're going to die first. I think there's going to also be something after the Democratic Party. I don't think the DNC is going to reign forever either. But I think the GOP is closer to the end. They're closer to death than they think, than they probably know. And so that's my prediction. My prediction is that by the time the next presidential election rolls around in 2024, there will be a new third party that will be more or less an alternate to the GOP. And the GOP will be on its deathbed, in its death throes. It's already in its death throes, in my opinion. So this moves me to my next point, which is what's going on with this left and right split. Now, some people believe that left and right are sort of inbuilt into human nature, and our personalities are constructed in such a way that everyone's sort of more or less on the right or more or less on the left. But here in America, we actually have an unusual situation. There's actually a large number of people who identify as libertarians, something like 30% of people polled, which is insane. I don't know what it's like in other countries. I just know that here in the United States, we have a very, very big libertarian streak. And I think that's part of the population. I think it's something that's inbuilt to the kind of people that decided to move here, that decide to come here. And the fact that the United States is mostly a nation of immigrants means that there's a sort of self-selection that happens here with regard to the kind of people that choose to come live here. And I don't know necessarily that whatever comes next is going to be a libertarian party. I think there's some issues with libertarian politics and libertarian ideology that actually make it very, very difficult for them to have any real national traction. So I'm not saying that there's going to be a libertarian party, but one of the things that I do think is going to happen is that we're going to increasingly move past this left-right paradigm in terms of talking about politics. I think that the future is going to be along very different cleavages. I think that globalist versus localist is going to be big. I think that people are going to start talking more about populist versus elitist. People are going to start talking about institutionalist versus individualist. And this is really the type of political vibrancy and vitality that I want to see in our discourse. Part of the reason why I have this channel is to start thinking about the future of politics with you all and to start moving beyond these old and really outdated ways of thinking about politics. You know, we've had left versus right since the French Revolution. And before that, you know, it was like, I don't know, monarchist versus Democrat or something. And so these new cleavages are going to pop up. People are going to talk about globalist versus localist. People are going to talk about populist versus elitist. People are going to talk about institutionalist versus individualist. And there's going to be a realignment. There's going to be a realignment more along these more fundamental principles of how society should be organized, how the economy should be split up, whether or not you're more cosmopolitan or more localist, and whether or not you believe that the old institutions need to be preserved and we should keep them going, or if you're more on the side of individuals and individual freedom and the belief that we shouldn't let these dinosaurs get in the way of reform. So those are my thoughts on the death of the GOP. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Do you think the GOP is done for? Do you think they're going to be around for a long time? Do you think, the Democrats are going to be done for? This is the show about the future of politics, and I'll see you guys next time.